As Denver 7's Jennifer Kovaleski reports, this tragedy did not happen in the spur of the moment. This was months, maybe even years in the making.
Well, this is a story about control, online harassment, and a 10-year-old boy caught in the middle.
Did they protect your son?
No.
A fatal encounter the boy's mother says could have been prevented.
There was so many agencies were involved, so many. I begged, talked to, can try to convince everybody to do something.
Let's go back to early Saturday morning, September 21st. Jing Tesorero wakes up to a chilling email in her inbox. The author, her ex-husband, Anthony, telling her, by the time you finish reading this, Ty will be moments away from joining me in the afterlife.
It's pretty much like suicide note, and he said he was gonna take my son with him. And I called 911.
Jing got in the car and drove to her ex's Lone Tree apartment.
Just kept waiting for an ambulance, and I was hoping there was gonna be an ambulance.
But no ambulance would show up.
And he said they both were dead in the house.
Her ex-husband shot her son Ty and then turned the gun on himself.
Heartbroken. I don't know, I don't even know the words. What else? I'm feeling angry, upset, regrets, and...
Less than 24 hours before,
we had an awful hearing at the family court. I was gonna get custody of my son.
But somehow Ty still goes home with his dad.
Did you want your son to go with his dad that night?
No, we even told the judge more than once that we were worried. We were concerned for Ty's safety.
She did anticipate an order being issued over the weekend for Ty to be removed. Within 8 hours, Ty was murdered.
Caroline Cooley is Jing's attorney. Her firm specializes in complicated family law, but she says this case is different.
In 20 years, I have never had a case where a child has been so systematically, methodically, consistently alienated.
Just an absolutely heartbreaking story. Now, Douglas County's Human Services Department says the entire community is grieving. State law prevents them from releasing details about child welfare matters. But we are told the state is conducting a review of what happened, and those findings will be made public.
And tonight, Governor Polis is getting involved, telling Denver 7 he is closely monitoring a state investigation into what happened to Ty Tesorero and whether the court system failed to see the warning signs.
Denver 7's Jennifer Kovaleski broke the story yesterday at 6 o'clock. She's back with new details. And the more you learn, this is just so tragic.
Shannon and I've gone through hundreds of pages of court documents, read email after email where they asked police, prosecutors, DHS, you name it, to do something. But no one intervened. No one listened to their pleas for help until it was too late.
She's not your mother, Ty. She's a piece of crap. Remember how she cheated on Papa and how she lied?
Mom, yeah.
Yeah,
Mom,
remember that forever.
On Papa.
The audio recordings tell the real story of the abuse. A controlling ex-husband who brainwashed his son Ty and refused to let his mom pick him up for her court-ordered parenting time.
AJ, can you stop talking?
No, I can't, because you're a piece of shit.
Talking bad about me in front of
Despite the mandatory protection order she had against her ex Anthony, which should have prevented this, Jing Tesorero says the emotional and psychological abuse never ended.
His threats, he's using Ty, threatened me since the very beginning. Since the very first day, I wanted to be out of his control.
He even took those threats online, where he destroyed her and her new husband's reputation, and anyone else who got in his way.
He was going to Google for everything, and any professional that was involved was being threatened, and I think they didn't want to deal with him.
New emails going all the way back to May of 2018 show Jing's attorney Caroline Cooley alerted police and the court system that Anthony has been wrongfully keeping the minor child for the last 56 days. She demanded a criminal investigation for violating his protection order, noting there has been an ongoing pattern of mental abuse by father with the minor child.
I requested Department of Human Services multiple times to reopen the case, to assume jurisdiction. My requests were rejected.
In August, it continues. So Jing's attorney reaches out to Douglas County Human Services directly, writing, "We have at least 3 police reports and now a DHS call in the last 75 days.
And nobody wanted to investigate. We talked to the police. We tried to file a police report because we couldn't prove that's him.
It would take 15 months before Jing would finally get her day in court. A day when the judge finally saw her ex for who he really was, the last day Jing would see Ty alive.
Ty should have been moved from father's custody and put into mother's custody 15 months ago. We requested it. Our request was denied.
The judge planned to give Jing custody, but took the weekend to write her order, letting Ty go home with his dad. Less than 24 hours after the custody hearing, Anthony shot his son and then turned the gun on himself.
That kid went through so much, and he tried so hard just to not make things worse for me.
This is not an easy story to report on. And with the more digging we do, it seems clear the system failed this child, and this never should have happened. The state is investigating, and as we've reported, those findings will be made public. And Shannon, as you mentioned, an investigation that the governor is now watching closely.
Breaking new details tonight you will only hear on Denver 7. A professional tied to this case is sounding the alarm about this father's manipulative tactics to keep control of his son.
The level of threats that he would make and the stalking behaviors, in my opinion, should have terminated visitations.
Contact 7 investigator Jennifer Kovaleski uncovers a shocking paper trail that details the extreme measures this man went to get what he wanted.
My first thought was, how the heck did he go to unsupervised visits? How did he have the opportunity to kill his son?
She may be in the shadows. Her voice may be disguised.
Just to protect my family and retaliation against me?
But she can't stay quiet any longer.
Hopefully prevent this from happening to another child.
She's a professional who worked the case.
I feel like they catered to this man's behavior.
Now taking us inside the Douglas County Department of Human Services.
Do you think the system failed Ty?
I do.
An agency charged with protecting children. She says gave in to a bully and allowed a domestic violence abuser to work the system.
Maybe fear. Maybe they were scared of him. He had way more power than he should have ever been given.
Decisions that would end up costing 10-year-old Ty Tesoriero his life. Anthony Tesoriero would kill his son and then himself hours after being told he was losing custody of Ty, but could spend the night with him.
I believe this whole case was about control.
To understand what led up to Ty's murder, our informant takes us back to 2016 when social services first got involved. Records show the court ordered Anthony only be allowed to have supervised visits with Ty. At the same time, DHS employees were actively investigating whether Anthony was even to be a parent.
I witnessed military punishment, sit-ups, push-ups. At one point, I witnessed him taking food from the child.
And she isn't the only one who reported disturbing behavior between Ty and his father. A September 2016 report from a visitation supervisor details how Anthony grabbed the child's arm too tightly. Child was crying, saying, "Just stop it, Papa," all in front of a DHS worker paid to supervise visits. What this professional can't understand is how the court would later grant Anthony 50-50 parenting time.
At any point, did you think this was a man fit to be a father who should have 50-50 parenting time?
When I saw the story on the news, I was actually quite shocked that he even had his kid unsupervised.
Even more shocking, she says, given that Anthony had actually threatened and intimidated several people working the case, including her.
Anthony stalked me, down to family members. He did that to install fear.
So he would say something like what to you?
I saw your German Shepherd in the backyard last night. Or how's your husband doing? And then name his name.
Did you submit documents to DHS that laid out what you experienced?
Yes, they were well aware of it. They were also well aware that he had done it to their own caseworkers.
Warning signs she says DHS completely ignored.
The level of threats that he would make and the stalking behaviors, in my opinion, should have terminated visitations. Should have terminated child contact.
Instead, the contact she and other professionals had with the family was terminated, which is exactly what Anthony demanded.
Anybody that he didn't feel that was in his corner.
We now have proof of how far his threats went. Court records obtained by Contact 7 Investigates show a doctor discharged Ty over his father's behavior, writing in this letter from July of 2016. As you know, his father has previously threatened my office manager with a lawsuit. Now he's resorted to defaming me and harassing my patients on the internet. I cannot tolerate this type of verbal abuse from his father.
He would continue to manipulate people till he eventually got what he wanted.
Contact 7 Investigates Jennifer Kovaleski broke this story. And Jen, you've learned Anthony should have never had his gun in the first place.
He never should have. That's because domestic violence abusers are supposed to turn over their weapons in Colorado. But we're finding it doesn't always happen. Anthony Tesoriero was one of those abusers who never should have had a gun, but clearly did. District Attorney George Brockler says the law isn't working. Do you believe your office did everything it could to step in here? Or in hindsight, could you have done more?
You can't help but ask, should we have done something different? Could we have achieved something different?
District Attorney George Brockler says a Colorado gun law passed in 2013 is also failing to protect domestic violence victims like Jing and her son. A law which should have prevented Anthony Tesoriero from ever having a gun.
Problem is, that law does not work.
The law says domestic abusers with protection orders have to turn over their firearms within 72 hours. Fail to do so, and the court shall issue a warrant for their arrest. But the courts have denied these motions, saying they won't grant an arrest warrant for noncompliance in these cases.
Every single county court judge signed off on an order that said, no, we're not going to do it, and we don't think the law requires us to do it. That left us with no other options. It's a law that is toothless and largely unenforceable.
Anthony never turned in his gun, even after his ex-wife filed a mandatory protection order against him. A gun he never should have had, used to do the unimaginable.
They need to acknowledge that this law is ineffective. It does not work, not by word and certainly not by practice, and it needs to be changed if that's our goal.
Brockler says that the legislature could close this loophole just by tweaking the language of the law. They are aware of the problem and for some reason haven't fixed it.
So if you watch Denver 7 regularly, you have heard us talk about Ty Tesoriero, murdered by his father, Anthony, just 2 weeks ago, brainwashed to see his mother as the enemy before that happened. And Anthony, the father, was so much a bully, even the social workers couldn't stand up to him.
Which begs the simple question, how could a judge look this man in the face and not see him for what he really was? For the first time tonight, we know she did. And then she gave him custody of his son for one last weekend.
The Contact 7 Investigates Jennifer Kovaleski has been on this, going through stacks of court documents. Jen's in the newsroom tonight with this final piece of the puzzle. Jennifer?
Shannon and Jacqueline, we've had dozens of viewers ask us how the judge could make a decision like this based on what they've seen. We've had the same questions. Tonight, we're going to show you the transcript from inside the courtroom a day before Ty's murder, what the judge did and didn't do to protect Ty, and the pleas for Ty's safety they ignored. It's September 20th at 9 a.m. We're in a Douglas County Division II courtroom.
I begged, talked to, can try to convince everybody to do something.
After 15 months of pleading for Department of Human Services, the courts, police to do something, Jing Tesoriero would finally get her day in court to fight for custody of her 10-year-old son Ty.
We put all of the eggs in our basket on the hearing of September 20th. We were not going to fail Jing.
The court transcript shows Caroline Cooley was there as Jing's attorney.
What happened in that hearing?
It went very well for Jing.
And while it would go well for Jing, the judge's decision not to remove Ty from his dad's custody that Friday will end up playing a direct role in his murder.
I don't really quite get her decision on that. I really wish things were different.
Ty's dad, Anthony Tesoriero, killed his son and then himself. 8 hours after the court adjourned at 5:21 p.m. Friday, Ty was murdered around 2:30 a.m. Saturday.
Ty shouldn't have been there in the house.
When Anthony lost, he decided to go after the one person who wouldn't fight back. He went after Ty, because that is what bullies do.
Judge Patricia Herron basically reads Anthony the riot act, telling the courtroom, "I'm angry. I have rarely seen this kind of alienation in any case, and it is really shocking. The damage that has been caused to this young boy is unthinkable." Herron goes on to say, at this point, the court finds Dad's credibility to be zero. What was the judge so angry about? The death threats, constant online harassment of Jing and her new husband, and many times Anthony violated his mandatory protection order. Cooley says Herron was the first judge to see Anthony for who he really was, but it wasn't enough to save Ty.
When the judge told Dad, "I don't believe you. You have no credibility. I can't believe what's happened in this case. This is going to change. I think at that point in time, the decision had been made by Dad.
Cooley would ask the court to have law enforcement take custody of Ty that day, telling the judge, "I am concerned that if there is an ulterior, if there is an order that the father does not like, we are concerned that he will abscond with the child."
Did you want your son to go with his dad that night?
No, we even told the judge more than once that we were worried. We were concerned for Ty's safety.
Court records show the judge had DHS Child Services at the hearing, and they were ready to have the child removed. But Heron tells the courtroom, "I am not going to do removal today. If it occurs, I'll do it first thing in the morning." Ty wouldn't have until the morning, and now Dad had a timeline.
She did anticipate an order being issued over the weekend for Ty to be removed. Within 8 hours, Ty was murdered.
And he lost. He lost, and he had to take Ty with him. It's the only thing he could control.
It is so hard to understand what happened here. Ty's memorial is this Saturday at 3 p.m. at Logo Central Chapel in Centennial. Ty's favorite color was red, and he loved animals. So his family is asking everyone to wear bright colors and bring a stuffed animal. Shane and the family will donate the stuffed animals to a domestic violence crisis center.
Oh, Jen, this is so tough.
My heart immediately sank.
Colorado lawmaker Jonathan Singer can relate to Ty Tesorero's tragic story. He worked as a Boulder social worker before running for office.
This is tragic, and we know that more and more of these cases can be prevented.
The Democratic representative from Longmont is now vowing to use his power to make sure what happened to Ty never happens again.
We absolutely have to introduce legislation next year. We're going to look before we leap and make sure we're doing this the right way.
Ty was murdered at the hands of his own father, Anthony Tesorero, a known domestic violence abuser who bullied his way through the system. It would take Ty's mom, Jing, 15 months to get her day in court to fight for custody.
I think we can look at a faster track process on restricting parents' rights when there is a legitimate safety concern.
Zinger is calling for a top-to-bottom review, which the state is currently conducting.
I know people want answers tomorrow. I want answers tomorrow. But ultimately, if we were going to do justice for this case, we need to be thorough.
In the meantime, Singer is looking at writing a law to force judges to go through more training, especially since the judge in Ty's case was planning to give Jing custody, but decided not to remove Ty that day, a decision which would play a direct role in his murder.
Making sure that our family court system has better training for our judges to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of domestic violence.
The Longmont lawmaker also wants to see a loophole in Colorado's gun law closed.
Guns and domestic violence is a deadly mix, and we know that. We've got the laws on the books. They just need to be enforced.
A law which should have prevented domestic violence abusers, with protection orders, like Anthony, from ever owning a weapon.
These are the kinds of things that don't leave your soul, and they affect an entire community. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure we do better, and that Ty's death will never be in vain.
Now, Zinger supports the idea of a dedicated family law court system, one where judges are experts in this one area. He says the biggest question is about funding, and if there's enough money to create one in a low-tax state like Colorado. We will stay on top of this. Shannon?
An op-ed to the Denver Post. Family courts are failing miserably to protect our children.
For Marley McLean, this fight is personal.
If you think children are protected by our courts, please think again. It makes me cry. I have been speaking and writing about this crime for over 30 years.
A domestic violence expert, McLean's journey started after she says Colorado's courts failed to protect her child.
The more I fought in the system, the more time she got with her father.
What did you think when you heard about Ty's story?
All I could think of is that mother's anguish and the pain of the death of her child when she knew what was happening and begged the courts to help her.
10-year-old Ty Tesorero was murdered at the hands of his own father, 8 hours after Anthony Tesorero, a known domestic abuser, learned he was likely going to lose custody. But still the judge ruled to let Ty go home with his dad for one last night.
The courts are allowing themselves to be tools for the abuser.
Which takes us back to her open letter.
Colorado has no specialized court. Rather, the lower court judges rotate through family court.
McLean is one of dozens of experts now pushing for better trained judges and a dedicated family court system. She believes a judge with more training on domestic violence would have made a difference in Ty's case.
We need to have judges trained in domestic violence, child abuse, child sexual abuse. We need a separate court.
Another opinion letter Burnham Law wrote to the Daily Camera calls Ty's story a complete systematic failure. They go on to say, "We are family law attorneys with decades of experience. Our conclusion and the consensus of our peers is that families need, a dedicated family law court."
And hopefully Governor Polis will take a hold of it and say, okay, enough.
McLean also says the system needs to make child safety a priority. She's calling on the legislature to fix Colorado's flawed system and make changes to the law that force judges to protect children before they're hurt, not after, when it's often too late.
The children, I don't think are mattering. That's what I see. I don't see the children being protected.
You are right to be skeptical of a call to overhaul the family court system, but we've seen this work in other states. North Carolina has what they call unified family courts. There, each district can decide to have one, and those judges only work on family court cases, and they go through specialized training. Shannon, for comparison, Colorado judges rotate from criminal to civil to family law with no specialized training. So essentially, they know a little about a lot, but they're not experts in one area.
Not experts in one area.
Tonight, you're about to witness the moment Jing finds out her 10-year-old son is gone, murdered by a vengeful father and ex-husband who took his own life in that same night.
Contact 7 investigates. Jennifer Kovaleski continues her coverage on a custody battle that never should have ended this way.
911, where's your emergency? I got an email saying that he's going to kill my son.
A desperate mother calls 911 in the middle of the night, fearing for her son's life.
Hey, Jing, this is Corporal Joseph with Lone Tree Police.
As the Lone Tree police officer heads to the apartment where her 10-year-old son Ty is staying, Jing Tesorero reads the chilling email sent from her ex-husband Anthony Tesorero.
Says, Jing, you might have thought you want something today, but all you've done is lost everything for Ty.
A suicide note. Anthony also posts online for all the world to see. All of this just 8 hours after Anthony learns he will likely lose custody of Ty.
By the time you finish reading this, Ty will be moments away from joining me in the afterlife. You will get to remain here to live with your choices.
The call for help came in at around 2:18 on the morning of September 21st. Officers show up to Dad's apartment fairly quickly, but this body cam video shows it takes them more than 30 minutes to go inside, and only after getting a hold of Ty's stepmom, Charlotte.
Is it Charlotte?
Yes.
Charlotte is sleeping inside and finds another chilling note on Ty's bedroom door.
What does the sign say?
Charlotte says, do not go inside the room, just call the police and let them handle it.
Come to the door. Charlotte, come open the door for us, the front door.
Police find Anthony and Ty both dead inside. Of course, we are not going to show you those tragic moments, but Jing and her attorney want the world to hear this.
He is dead, and so is Anthony.
No, 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 no. Do something.
We've been saying this is going to happen. And nobody could do anything. Nobody was going to help me. I've been calling you guys for a year about this guy.
They say the system's broken, and this only further proves it.
I told you guys that he was going to kill Ty. We told you.
They told everyone, child services, police, prosecutors, but no one listened until it was too late for Ty.
I don't want to talk to you guys. I don't want to talk to you guys. Never done anything good for my son.
System that failed this Colorado mother.
I don't want this to ever happen again.
Tonight, and only on Denver 7, months after a nasty custody battle ended her son's life, the lawmaker pushing forward to create change.
Denver 7 at 10 starts right now.
It has been almost 3 months now since the tragic murder of 10-year-old Ty Tesorero. The Lone Tree boy was killed back in September by his own father, hours after the man was about to lose custody.
It was a tragic story that exposed how a 2013 law that was supposed to keep Ty's father from having a gun isn't working.
Contact 7 investigator Jennifer Kovaleski has covered this story from the start. Now, Jen, one state lawmaker is on a mission to fix that loophole.
Yes, she is, Ann and Tom. As a convicted domestic violence abuser, Ty's dad was supposed to turn in his gun, but he never did. The problem is no one is keeping track. No one is enforcing the law.
I was such a sweet kid. He has so much potential.
Jing Tesorero should be looking forward to Christmas with her 10-year-old son Ty. Instead, she's having to spend her first holiday without him.
Did they protect your son?
No. Nobody did.
Hours after learning he was going to lose custody, Ty's father killed him. Anthony Tesorero would then turn the gun on himself.
He's not supposed to have a weapon.
A Colorado bill signed into law 6 years ago should have prevented Anthony, a convicted domestic violence abuser, from ever having a gun. But District Attorney George Brockler told us back in October.
Problem is, that law does not work.
The law says domestic violence offenders with protection orders have to turn over their firearms within 72 hours or face arrest. But what it doesn't say is who is responsible for making sure that happens.
It's a law that is toothless and largely unenforceable.
Jing Tesorero told us she believed that the system failed her.
I agree, and I know I would feel the same way that she does.
Jefferson County lawmaker Monica Duran is introducing legislation next month. She says will close the loophole.
What this bill will do is it'll lay out the steps needed to make sure that there aren't any loopholes.
A loophole that let Anthony keep his weapon, despite this mandatory protection order telling him otherwise.
It matters because it'll save lives.
Duran says they are still working out the final details, but her bill will give law enforcement and the courts a clear process for who is responsible for ensuring Colorado abusers turn over their guns.
There's no doubt that the process has been done, and there's back-checking.
A domestic violence survivor herself.
When I finally came to the point where I couldn't live with this anymore, my son was about 2 years old, and it was a very violent situation, and he did have a gun.
She wants to bring change to the system Jing says repeatedly failed her.
Yes, it's been 6 years, but we're here now, and I'm trying to do something about it now.
Lawmakers go back to work at the Capitol next month, where we know passing any kind of gun legislation is a challenge. Duran told me she's confident that she can get this done. She says this is a nonpartisan issue, and domestic violence doesn't discriminate. For now, we're in the newsroom. I'm Contact 7 investigator Jennifer Kovaleski.